daily conversations.
Narratives. Yes.
Narratives are very important and should be included in our activities of teaching, speaking and listening. So today at RELC, it is a great honor that we are welcoming Dr. Alexander Akil's presence and give us an interview with of the issue. Yeah. Good evening, Doctor.
Hello.
What do you think of making use of narratives in teaching, speaking, and listening?
Oh, I think it's...
And how can we use cartoons effectively to teach speaking and listening?
Oh, I think that using narratives in general, teaching, speaking, and listening, that's what it's all about. I mean, finding something that's a good story, ideally for some students, your students, who can also read along with the text. That's always a good thing to do, but students don't get motivated so much by reading books all the time. Young students in particular love watching cartoons. So I think that you can take a cartoon that has an inherent value, an inherent interest for young students, young boys. My sons love watching cartoons. They can just sit there glued to it for hours. And if you do something like put subtitles on it so that they're hearing and reading at the same time, this can be a part of their learning. You have to interact with them, you have to talk to them, you have to get them reading books, but this would be something they love to do. That does have narrative content that's interesting to them and catch their attention. So if you use the device of putting subtitles in, then they'll be hearing and reading. So I know that even teachers from Vietnam, some of you have some problems with listening when we try to put the things in. If you start them out young enough doing that, maybe they'll have better abilities to hear and listen and catch specific sounds.
Dr. Alexander?
Yes?
We understand that you advertise in many fields, linguistics in general and teaching English as a second language in particular. And you have worked here for so many batches of Vietnamese teachers coming here. What challenge do you find when you teach the methodology for Asian in general and to Vietnamese teacher in particular? What advice can you give us to improve our professional methods?
Well, that's a big and hard question. Yes, I have taught lots of batches of Vietnamese students. I've gotten very fond of you. I think I've gotten used to you. It'd be nice to keep doing it. I'm sorry that you're the next to last batch here. Maybe I'll go back with you.
Yeah.
Take me back to Vietnam with you so I can keep teaching you. Advice? Well, one thing that we're just talking about, frankly speaking, you're one of the best that I've met in this category in terms of improving your own skills. That's the most important thing that you all have to do. That, I mean, in any language that you work with, you're a teacher of a foreign language, there's always ways that you can improve, always things that you can do. And I think that a lot of the teachers that I've met, seems to me that they've been at a plateau. They haven't made that much progress overall their own skills over the course of their 5 or 6 months of being here, and probably they haven't made much progress in the past. You know, maybe they learned when they were young and in college, and then they got to their village and they're the best person, and they only speak down to their students. They don't get any good input. But I think that with some of the things that I've tried to show you in the IT class, I mean, with the computer, there's so many things so many resources that you can get for listening, for speaking. And so I think that it's very important for each teacher to sort of make a personal commitment to really chart their progress and say, okay, I'm going to do some self-assessment. This is where I am on January 1st of this year. This year I really want to improve. Seriously, I want to not just talk about it. I'm going to take active steps to improve my listening. So January 1st of next year, I want to do that. Some sort of program like that. I would say more than anything else in terms of implementing the methodology, it is you know, you have to be a good role model and you have to have the skills.
Yeah.
So there's that. And I think that when you do that, you'll get to know you'll stop being just a teacher. I suspect that some people have just been teachers for 10 or 20 years, and you become a student again, like you've been here, and you'll be more aware of what your students are going through. So I think in terms of implementing methodology that we've taught you here, or in terms of developing more methodology on your own, to suit your classroom situation, which I haven't seen up front, you'll probably be in a better position to do that.
Thank you.
Okay.
This is another question.
Okay.
Actually, not from the Vietnamese teacher, but from the parents. Now today, Vietnamese parents are fully aware the role of teaching English for the children. But the question is that how young, how old enough for the little kids to start learning English as a second language?
How young is old enough?
Yeah. It's better 5 years old, 6 years old, when they are in elementary school or junior high school.
Okay, I mean, this goes back to, in sort of language learning and teaching methodology, a distinction between language acquisition and language learning. If you can take young children who are 5 and 6 years old and you can put them in a situation where they're really able to acquire the language and really hear it and really use it a lot, I think they can get a lot of benefit from that. I think that children, though, who are, say, under 10, in terms of teaching them the way you teach older children, trying to explain things and give them rules and grammar, that's not going to work all that well. I mean, I know that my son now, who's in 3rd grade here, I mean, he has his math book, he has his science book. You could try to give him language rules the same way that you do that, but that does seem to me a bit too young to teach in that way.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it doesn't have to be 5. If you find some environment where you can really give the young people, the young children, a lot of input that they're actually absorbing, it has to be interaction. You can't just sort of, you can't just play cartoons for them. You can't just have, things in the background. They have to actually be spoken to and talked to, interacted with. So if you can provide that, then there's no age that's too young. Okay, if you can really give that. But if you can't give that, and I think that this is the frustrating thing that your parents are going to face and people all over the world who are trying to get their children to have more English. I don't think that if you just give a child a little bit of English and it's not enough input, not enough sort of absorption or assimilation of the language, it's not really going to benefit from it. It's going to be a waste of time and money. If you let a child like that just get a little bit older when he's interested in it, and teach him in a good way, he might be farther ahead. I think there have been lots of cases like that where you take a student who've been sort of playing around with it, not really learning, not really studying, not really absorbing, just having some exposure since they were 5, 6 years old. And then you put them in a class with students who haven't had that when they're, say, 11 years old. And those students who've been around the language for a long time, it's not interesting to them, it's not new, they're not motivated to try to learn it. But the student who hasn't might be and might make more progress. So it's a question of how you expose them.
The environment and the motivation.
That's right.
If you don't mind, could I have another question?
Sure.
I'm very interested in talking to you.
Okay.
I was lucky enough to watch clips in which you are speaking to my classmate, and suddenly you change to Dutch.
That's right.
You met and you talk to the Dutch girls, and the comment under it. I see so many people was very excited when suddenly you change to very, very fluent Dutch. Now, Vietnamese teachers are requested to take a second language. Besides English, we must learn either French or Chinese or Japanese, Korean, and this is a real challenge for us, especially for people a bit old. So what is your experience, the first few experience when we want to learn a second language? Some practical ones.
It's a very broad question. Can you make it a bit more precise? So your Vietnamese teachers are required to learn another language, choosing from about 5 different languages, 6 languages you said, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Thai, did you say?
No, Thai is not very popular.
Chinese, Japanese, Korean, French,
and Spanish.
Okay. Yeah, it's nice to be required. It's kind of a motivation, but it's a huge burden for other people. So if you find yourself in that situation, I think that the thing you would have to say is, oh, if this is my situation, I have to learn this language. If I just go at it with that external burden, I'm not going to succeed. Again, I'll waste my time. I won't get good results. If I can accept the fact that I have to do this, I need to develop some internal motivation that makes me want to do it. So, all right, I have to choose these. Let me think. Yeah, I like Korean food, or I like Spanish music. That's my first in. Give me some tie with the culture. And then pick off, you can also sort of go at it kind of logically. If you're a professional English teacher, that's mainly what you're going to do. English, Spanish, and French have a lot of vocabulary. You can play on that. But I think that in the past, Vietnamese had a lot of influence from China. Is that not correct? So there's a lot of Chinese vocabulary in Vietnamese, and also in Japanese and Korean. So in terms of vocabulary, you have to learn for these languages. This ought to be a motivating factor. From Vietnamese, you already have the East Asian vocabulary, and from your English, you already have the Western vocabulary. So you should know that this task of learning the second language should be easier for you than it was to learn English. So a lot of psychological preparation, a lot of finding motivation inside yourself. That's the first key. If you have the right attitude, it will come out. But somehow you can't force yourself to love something that you don't love. But you can try, and if you can do that, that's really the most important step. And then, yeah, I would say just looking at it as a challenge for professional development, a challenge for interest, and the same way that I suggested in terms of continuously improving your English. If you don't have a lot of real drivenness, then make yourself a chart, make yourself a progress chart, put yourself on that. And at a certain point when you're doing something like learning a language, I think that progress becomes its own motivator. You start making progress, and if you stop, then you'll feel bad about yourself. And when you feel your progress, that motivates you to do more. Maybe that starts to answer your question.
One last short question.
Okay.
Returning to using video for teaching English, what is the right amount of using video for students?
Gosh, I don't know. For what level? For what level?
Yeah.
What level students?
If there is
Per week. Per week.
Well, if you have the video like you did for your project, if you put in a lot of subtitles, I think that listening and speaking and reading, that goes along together. If the students are really interested and motivated by that, I wouldn't see why you couldn't do a lot of that. But I don't think that ought to be all that you do, certainly. I don't know how many hours a week you have to teach, how much time could you do that? I think that you also need to watch out for maybe doing it just as an excuse. Oh, okay, they like to watch, okay, let's let them be happy and let them watch it, and not really get anything from it. You have to make sure that it's productive.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we know that you are busy now.
Well, that's
Yeah, we will have more questions, but I understand we are
If you have
busy
another,
now.
I'll take one more if you want.
Yeah, exactly as you said, my friend,
Yes.
he's very interested in Chinese first. But after a couple of years, he finds this overlap between Chinese and Japanese. So nowadays, he can read. I'm not sure how fluently he can speak, but he can read it easily. Because I find this a percentage of overlapping between the two languages. So is it a good way to start learning a new language when we find something in common between English? For example, my second language is English, and I believe there's some common ground between English and French, because they are the origin Latin. Right? Is it a good idea?
I think it's an excellent idea. I mean, that's one of the keys to my success, that I've always studied languages in a comparative way and looked at, okay, what are the commonalities, what can I use, what can I leverage from one language to help me with another. And they say, I don't know if these are exact figures, but kind of parallel, that the overlap between the vocabulary in Chinese, Japanese, and Korean is about 70%. Korean and Japanese take about 70% of their words from Chinese, and likewise English takes about 70% of its words, either directly from Latin or from French and Spanish through Latin. So yes, for you to learn French or to learn Spanish, I can give you some specific books that will point out how you can sort of convert an English word to a French word or to a Spanish word. You'll see the commonalities in the end use. So for you to start out, when you started out learning English, you had a huge vocabulary burden.
Yeah.
But you already, we tested you, you've got one of the highest vocabularies we've ever seen come in here.
Yeah.
You have a huge English vocabulary that's got an amazing overlap. Okay, so for you to learn French or Spanish, of course there would be some words, and then there's the grammar, there's the pronunciation, there's everything else. Okay, but in terms of the vocabulary battle, you have a huge advantage already.
Yeah. Yes, well,
So we have learned a lot of interesting things from this talk.
Okay.
Yeah, thank
I
you
wish
so
our
much
classes
for
could be more like this. If our class could be
This-
sort of less structured and more like, okay, let's talk about what's really interesting to us. That would
Yeah.
be very good.
Yeah, I will tell my classmates. Last question are waiting for you.
Okay.
But as Vietnamese, they are a bit shy when talking to you.
I don't think your group is shy. Your group does not seem shy. Some people maybe, but there are a lot of not very shy people in your class.
Okay.
one more time. Thank you very much for this very nice evening.
Okay.
Right.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah.